Morning everyone, and welcome to this Sage Intelligence webcast. Today I'm going to cover Carmen's favorite Excel tips when working with financial reports. So what I want to cover today, I want to cover, if you haven't seen Intelligence, just mention why you would want to use Sage Intelligence. I'm going to show you some of my favorite Excel tips when working with reports, and I'm going to give you some information on where to find these Excel tips as well as Sage Intelligence tips. So let's get started. Okay, why use Sage Intelligence? Why would you want to be interested in Sage Intelligence? Well, Sage Intelligence allows you to gain control over your reports. So based in Excel, you can then format the report the way you want it and you can save it back. Now this saves you time when customizing the reports. Not every month you have to go in and then reformat those Excel workbooks. You can actually save them back, and then you can have the workbooks, most of the integrations, updated automatically. Otherwise, the tips that I'm going to show you today will allow you to quickly customize your Excel workbooks. Also, from there you can actually take action. So using Excel functionality, you can set up conditional formatting that actually alerts you on certain things that you want to be actually alerted on. So for more information on Sage Intelligence and how it works with which products we work with, please go to sageintelligence.com and check it out there. Okay, so these are some of my favorite Excel tips which I've covered in previous webcasts, and I'm going to spice them up a bit today in a different Excel workbook and add a few additional tips. So the first one I love is the VLookUp. This allows me to actually check a particular cell and then find a value that actually matches that. So for instance, the one I use very regularly is the period and the month. So we use in our formulas always the period number, and people like to work with month names instead. So I've used this in my workbooks many a times to either find the period month, otherwise I've used it to pull in the period number by using the name instead. So we'll have a look at that. Data validation to allow you to click on a drop-down list. This also stops user errors. So if they spelled the month name wrong or something like that, just allow them to select from the drop-down list, and then you won't have any spelling errors, etc. Charts, which give you a visual view of your data, and it's also very informative. At a quick glance, you can see what your gross profit is and your net profit, etc. Slices are one of my favorite things. It's nice and easy to see. You just click on what you want and your data then automatically updates. So that's another way of actually just filtering your data by using slices, and I'll take you through that. And in all our Sage Intelligence formulas, we use absolute referencing, and how you can then, once you've absolute referenced your formulas, you can then click and drag and use autofill and so on. And as you can see, that is the autofill functionality, which allows you to not have to reinvent the wheel every time. If you set up your absolute referencing correctly, you can click and drag your formulas across your Excel workbook. I love grouping because you've got a higher level at like maybe a category level that you want to report on, and then sometimes you want to see that additional information. And I like to hide that additional information using grouping. And I'll show you how to apply grouping to our workbooks, and you can then try it out yourself. IFERROR is one of my favorites. This basically allows me to manage my errors that I get in my workbooks. So instead of seeing hash error or hash name, I can actually just see a 0. And then when I look at my formula, my report, I can see, hang on, that doesn't match, and then I know there's an error in that particular report. So that's how you can manage errors using IFERROR. You got Format Painter, which I love, which allows us to quickly format your workbook. And you've also got Hide Rows and Columns, which you can also then apply to your Excel workbook. So let's go and have a look at this in a real life example. Okay, so I've got an Excel workbook here. I'm using Sage Accounting, and as you can see, I've got a balance sheet and income statements 1 to 12 and a year on year. Now I'm going to apply all these Excel tips onto one report so we don't get confused on where we're jumping up and down. And today I'm going to take you through this trial balance that I've created. Okay, so my first thing I want to do is I want to show you how to use data validation. Now for me, data validation is great because I can now come in here and change my year if I need to, and my data automatically updates. Now depending on which integration you're working with, you will then be able to use your task pane to actually then update this information. Let me just sign back in. So again, I can click on the drop down list and I can change that back to 2016, and my data then refreshes for me. The same with the month. Instead of changing the period over here, I'm actually just changing the month in the drop down list, and my data then updates automatically for me. So that's using drop down lists, and if you're wanting to use this, then all you need to do is set up some data validation. So on my right hand side over here, I've set up a month, period, and year. That is because I am using the month drop down list to actually return my period number. So that's why my month is first and my period is second. So how did I set this up? Firstly, let's do an easy one, which is the year. So I'm going to click on over here and I'm going to set up this year again. Okay, so to insert a data validation or drop down list, you go to data and then you select data validation and you select data validation. From this allow drop down box, you're going to select a list, and then from that you're going to click on source and you're going to go and say I want to select my years and click OK, and there you now actually have your periods. Okay, if I'm wanting my formulas to look at that period, I'd have to then go and year, I'd then have to go and change my formulas to look from there to there. Okay, then for August, to pull in the different months, and we're not doing anything, we're just pulling in the month, and then we're going to use our formula over here to pull in period 6. So again, using data validation, you click on the cell, you click on data, you select data validation, and we're going to use that drop down list. I'm going to go back and I'm going to select all of my months and I'm going to click OK. Remembering this list over here can be placed on a separate worksheet if you're going to reference it for multiple worksheets, and you can also then hide that worksheet. So I can then change the month and then that changes that over there. Now the way I set up the VLookUp, okay, is when I change this over here, I want my period number to change. So currently it's looking at August formula, and I'm going to show you how to set up this VLookUp. So over here underneath, I'm just going to set up my new VLookUp. So I'm going to press equal and I'm going to type in VLookUp, and you can see it automatically starts coming up. So I'm going to select that, and then it asks me for the value I'm going to look. So we're going to look up the April value, so I'm going to select that, or I can type in D11. Okay, and I'm going to absolute reference that because I don't want that to change. So to absolute reference, I'm going to press F4 on my keyboard once. That means it's never going to change. And then I'll put my comma in, and then it's going to ask me, where do you want me to search for that April? And I'm going to say in this table over here. Now you'll notice I've highlighted the periods 1 to 12 as well, because we actually want to return the second column of this table. So again, I'm going to absolute reference that by pressing the F4 key on my keyboard. I put my comma, and then it's going to say column index number. So which column do you want to return? Column 1 or column 2? So column 1 has our month name in it. We actually want to return the period number. So I'm going to say column 2. And then I want an exact match, so I'm going to select false. And then I'm going to close my bracket and press enter. And there you can see it automatically then updates my April to period 2. And if I had my formulas looking at that period 2, it will then update my table. So now I can click here and I can change it to September, and the period changes to period 7, which is over here. Now, just some quick things that you will like to learn. If, for instance, when you're setting up these particular months, periods and years, you may want to use autofill or flash fill. Okay, so to show you this, I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to remove this auto refresh for now. And using flash fill, all I need to do is highlight my 3 months that I've typed in, and instead of having to type in all 12, I can now click and drag that down, and you'll see it automatically populates the cells below that with the information that I need. The same thing for period. Okay, so if I had to take this away, I can then highlight those 3, double click, and then automatically populate for me. So that's just different ways that you can use autofill and also flash fill. If, for instance, you're using a different formula to maybe calculate a combined total, it can also then pick up that calculation for you. So if I said I wanted to take, let's just say that plus the year, and then I go down, it automatically then picks up that formula and drags the formula down for me. So it's just different ways of using autofill and flash fill. So let's just refresh my screen again, my report. Okay, so now it's looking back to normal. Something else I wanted to show you in here is actually applying our formulas. Now, this is Sage Accounting workbook, but the same logic applies to all our desktop and cloud products, okay, if you have the Excel add-in for the cloud product. To apply a particular formula, you need to click in the cell. For the cloud products, you need to be inside your table, okay, and you would go to your formulas. Then you would go down to the formula that you want to use. This instance, I'm going to use actual, so I'm going to click on that. And then I got my bolded parameters where I absolutely need them. So I'm going to select company name. I'm going to press F4. And then I'm going to absolute reference that, because when I click and drag it down, I don't want the company name to go down. Okay. Same with the year. I'm going to select the year. I'm going to press F4. And the period. F4. Now, as you can see, this is a TB, so we're using the account number there. So I'm going to select my account number. And this time around, I'm going to use absolute referencing, but I'm going to press it 3 times. So once is absolute reference. Twice means that the row is going to stay the same. 3 times is the column is going to stay the same. So when we click and drag, my formula is automatically going to pick up that it needs to move down to the next cell. Okay. So then I'm going to save that. Again, I can use autofill to click and drag that down, double click, and then it automatically populates all the way down in my table to the bottom of my table. Okay, so now let's go and check and make sure that is working nicely. So I'm going to refresh my workbook. If you're on the desktop, it automatically refreshes for you. Great. Now for Sage Sage Accounting in South Africa, Africa, Asia, and Australia, we automatically changed the sales and that income to a positive for you. So because I want to show you the debit and credit functionality, I want to actually take this off. Okay, so to change this, I'm going to go in and add a minus here. And then to show you another functionality of Excel, I'm going to use copy, and then I'm going to paste it with the special formulas. So I'm going to copy this, and then just my orange accounts, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste formula. Okay, and then I'm going to go down over here. I'm going to do the same with these, because these are my other income formulas. Okay. Now when I refresh my workbook, you can see it has now been populated correctly. Okay. Now what we want to do is, because this is a TB, we actually want to show it in a debit and credit column, like I have over here. So you can see any credits, I'll actually move to the credits, and any debits stay in the debit column. So how do I do this? Now, depending on the integration that you're working with, some of them have actual inside the, let me show you. Okay, just click on the formula. For the African and Asia and Australia area, you've got a balance type that will automatically move it to debit or credit for you. But if you don't have that functionality and you want to use Excel, this is how you would do it. Okay, so I used if statements to actually find out whether it's a positive or a negative, and then if it's a positive, I'm going to leave it as is, and if it's a negative, I'm going to actually show it in the credit column, and I'm going to make it a positive so that it all looks positive at the end of the day. So to do that, I'm going to apply if statements to this. So to do an if statement, I'm going to type in equals firstly, and then type in if, and then I'm going to open up a bracket. And as you can see, it takes you step by step through that particular function. So it's asking me for the logic test. So what I want to do is I want to say if that F15, if F15, and I'm going to absolute reference that once, twice, 3 times, because the column is going to stay the same. And I'm going to say is greater than 0. I want it to stay there. So if this statement is true, I want it to show whatever the amount is in F15. Okay, and I'm going to absolute reference it 3 times. If it's false, so if it's a negative amount, I actually want to show 0. So I'm going to say 0, and then I'm going to close my bracket, and I'm going to press enter. Now what I can do is I can then drag that across, because remember I used my absolute referencing, and you can see it's still referencing F15, which is great, but now I'm going to change that formula. Okay, so let me take that away and redo the if statement. So this time around, we want to show it as, if the amount is a negative, we want to show it in the credit column. So I'm going to go equals, if, open my bracket, the logic test is F15, and absolute reference it 3 times, and I'm going to say is less than 0. Then I'm going to put my comma in. I'm going to say then I want to show the F15 in this column. Okay, absolute reference 3 times, and I also want to change it from a negative to a positive. So to do that, I'm just going to say -1. Okay, and I want to put my comma, and if it's false, so if it's a positive, I want to show 0, and I'm going to close my brackets. Now what I can do is I can click and I can drag that down. And you can see it's then moved my formulas in the right spot. So let's just refresh my workbook again, and you can see the if statement has done its job and created that credit and debit columns. Okay, so now that I've shown you that, let's move on to some sales data. Okay, so the desktop people will definitely know that you can access multiple different tables from your database, and you can then create this information. For those that do have functionality for this, I've just created some tables here with data in it, and I'm going to show you how you can then create your pivot tables. Okay, so this over here is my sales by rep. So it's giving me all my sales, and it's giving me my reps details and all the information that I need. So using this table, I'm going to create a couple of pivot tables. And as you can see, I've created 3 already. One is sales reps by item, and then sales by customer, and then sales by item type. Okay, now the one I want to create now is my top 10 items sold. So to show you how these were all created, I'm going to create one. I'm going to copy firstly this one over here, and I'm just going to paste it next to it. Just a tip, you never want to paste a pivot table underneath another pivot table in case this one grows and it overrides your other one underneath it. So always put them alongside each other. Now that I've copied it, it's got the same information. I want to now customize this particular one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. And I said this is going to be my top 10 items sold. So I'm going to go items sold. And I'm going to copy that name. And I'm going to rename my pivot table. Now, you may ask me why you want to do this. I do it so that when I'm connecting my slices, I know which tables I'm actually connecting together. Okay, so I'm going to click on Analyze, and I'm going to paste that name in there, remove my space, and press Enter. And now when I click on that, my pivot table actually has a proper name to it that I can identify it. Okay, so now what I can do is now go and look and change this particular pivot table. So I'm going to open up the pivot table list, so show field list. And then I'm going to scroll across, and there's my list. And we're going to change it to the item description. So I'm going to remove item type, item description, and it already has my sales selected in here, total item. Okay, so I'm happy with that currently. So this is just basically copying your pivot table. And then what I want to do is I want to firstly sort to have my top numbers at the top and then my lower numbers at the bottom. So to do that, I'm going to click on the drop down list, and I'm going to go more sort options, and I'm going to say descending. And then I'm going to select my sum of my item totals and click OK. And there you can see it then descends that particular item sold. Now I don't necessarily need to see all of these items. I just want to be focusing on the top 10 items. So I'm going to click on the drop down list again, and I can use value filters and go down to top 10. Now you can make this top 5, top 3, as you've seen in my other pivot tables over here, but I'm going to go in and leave this as 10, and it's going to bring me my top 10 sales item totals. So I'm going to click OK, and then that reduces the size of that pivot table, showing me just the information that I need and want. Great. Now to show you, close that down, what I've done over here, you can see I've gone in and added my item sales type, and it's got 3 items. I've got my customers, and I've got my sales reps by numbers. I've created pivot charts off of these, and I've placed them on a dashboard over here. So you got my sales rep by item title, you got sales by customer, and you got item type by sales. Okay, and again, it depends on how much you want to show. You can show all, or you can show less. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to go and add a chart over here showing you those top 10 items. So I'm going to go back to my pivot table. I'm going to click on my pivot table and going to go to Analyze, and then Pivot Chart. And I'm going to select the column chart, okay? And I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to customize this particular chart to match the rest of my dashboard. So firstly, I'm going to hide all my chart buttons. I'm going to remove the grid lines and the legend, and I'm going to add data labels to that. So then I can see the different amounts that I've got there. Once I've done that, I can then remove that axis, my vertical axis, and I can see my information clearer. Then I want to also go in and change the name of this particular chart, and I can just type in item, put your top 10 items sold, and I'm going to format this to look like my other charts. So under format, I'm going to click on the whole chart, and I'm going to go no fill, and I don't want any lines either. So when I hide my grid lines, I will then just see that on a clear white background. So I'm going to cut this now, and I'm going to paste it on my dashboard. Then I can format it slightly by making it smaller and then putting it in the appropriate position.
Okay.
And if you're wanting to see more details, maybe change the format of these labels, you can then right click and go to data series, and you can further change and customize your report if you need to. Okay, so I'm just going to make that slightly bigger, and I'm then just going to change the color of my label. And there you have an additional chart added to your dashboard. Now, something else that you may want to do is actually filter this by a sales rep name. Okay, so going back to my pivot tables, you can click on any one of these pivot tables and create a slicer. So click on your pivot table, click on Analyze, insert a slicer. I'm going to scroll down to sales rep name. I'm going to Options. I'm going to say I want 4 columns, and then I'm going to drag it up, just change that, and I'm going to connect it to my other pivot tables, and then I'm going to copy it, sorry, cut it, and I'm going to paste it on my dashboard. Now, when I actually select a particular sales rep's name, you can see the data filters. And there's no need for the sales rep by item total to filter, because you kind of want to see all the sales reps there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that connection to this particular table. I'm going to go right click on my slicer, report connections, and I'm going to untick that sales reps and click OK. Now when I click on Craig or Jennifer, that top chart does not change. So that's one way of creating it. The other slicer that I want to show you is basically a date slicer. So I click on any pivot table. I'm going to say Analyze. I'm going to say Insert Timeline. And I'm going to use my invoice date. Now, as you can see, it's selecting months. But I kind of want to work with years. So I've changed that to years. And you can have quarters, months, or days, depending on what you want to use. Again, you can also change this, the color of it. So we can just go dark. And you can then decide whether you want the header in there or not. And you can then take this, cut it, and paste it into your chart or your dashboard. And make it a little bit smaller. Okay. And then what that allows you to do is then filter your data further. And as you can see, it changed only one. So you do exactly the same thing with your other slicer. You go to report connections, and then you tick in the pivot tables that you want to change. And you can see I've selected all, because technically when I change this, I want to be able to see what has actually changed. So if I go over here, all my charts actually update. Okay, so that's how you add slices and timelines in there into your report. Then what you would want to do is actually check that everything's in the correct page view. Okay, so to do that, you just go down to the bottom. Oops, there we are. And you can actually see if it fits in. So you may want to move this around. Move that up there. You may want to move that logo somewhere else. Move that up. And then what you could do is you could remove those grid lines. So under view, you just untick grid lines, and then when you go back to your normal view, you've got your dashboard, and you can change your data if you want to using your different slices. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you is, let me just close this down, is to take you through an aging rep data. Okay, so this is data that's been pulled. It's pulling in my customer name, it's pulling in the aging date, as well as what is currently due for 30, 60, 90, and 120 days. And it's also giving me my sales rep data. So what I want to show you here is how to create a pivot table from scratch. So to do so, you can see this over here is an empty worksheet that I'm going to be working in. I'm going to click on my data and I'm going to go insert and I'm going to go create pivot table. Now, just something to remember, if you're working on the desktop product, then you would always use raw data. So if you had to press F3 on your keyboard, you would find a name range called raw data and you would create your pivot tables off of that. Reason being is that when you are refreshing your data, you want to make sure that your data is being looked at as a whole at each month when you run it out. So make sure you select raw data when you are selecting the table or the range. For this particular instance, I can use my table name and I'm going to say an existing worksheet. So now I need to go and say where I want to place this particular pivot table. I'm going to click on my customer age and I'm going to place it over here. And I'm going to click OK. Now all that does is gives me a box. I still need to go in and decide what I want to see. So for this particular one, I'm going to select my customer name and you can see it populates there for me. And then I want to see 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and 120 days. And there you've got your creditor's age, your debtor's age, and you can then populate or filter this further by maybe adding a slicer. So let's go into Analyze, add a slicer by sales rep's name. Again, you can change that the way you want to see it. And then you can filter that data if you need to. So I'm going to close that down. Remembering, I like to always name my pivot tables. So I'm going to say here, aging. And then what I want to do is also maybe change the format of this particular pivot table. And to do that, you go to Design and you click on the drop down list and I'm going to select this one. And there I've created my pivot table. Now what I also wanted to do in this particular worksheet, I actually wanted to show you how to format this information. So over here you can see the data, some of it has decimal places, some of it doesn't. So I'm going to highlight that all. I'm going to right click and I'm going to format my cells. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can format it by selecting currency and you can remove the decimal places and you can see it like that. Or if you're wanting to use another option, I go down to custom and in my custom one I have this option here where it removes any dashes or spaces, and if you want to see zeros you can then put in zeros as well. So I'm going to leave it like that for now, and what I want to do is I actually want to go in and apply conditional formatting. Now obviously my data isn't necessarily the greatest because you can see most of my debtors are actually in 120, but what I want to do is I want to go and show you how you can apply conditional formatting to either one or multiple columns. So I'm going to select my 120 days by holding the Control-Shift key down and using my drop-down arrow, and I'm going to go and apply conditional formatting to this. So I'm going to go to my Home tab. I'm going to Conditional Formatting. The first thing I want to do is I want to show you how to highlight cells over a certain amount of money. So I'm going to say greater than, and here I can type in 40,000, and you can see how it then automatically filters through. And it's showing a light red fill with a dark red text. I want to change this to just red text. So you can customize that to go down to Customize Format. I'm going to select bold and I'm going to select red. And when I click OK, that then changes the format of that for me and I can click OK. Now what I also want to do is I actually want to see my top 10 of my debtors. Okay, so I want to go in again, go Home, I'm going to go Conditional Formatting, and I'm going to say top 10. And again, I'm going to say I want to fill this time with the border, fill, and I'm going to go light blue. Okay, and click OK. And then if I want to further sort this, I can do so by descending. and you can see it's brought my top 10 and all my reds above 40. So just different ways of actually notifying yourself on, maybe alerting yourself on people that need to pay you, people that you may want to follow up. So just different ways of actually visually seeing that information. Now, once you've done all these changes, the great thing about Excel is that you can save it. So I can go File, Save As, and I'm just going to name it V2. Okay. And then you've got that workbook for next time. So when your data refreshes, you'll see that it will then automatically update this information. Now, some things that I want to just mention is that if, for instance, you are looking to PDF this particular workbook that came up recently, you can do so a couple of ways, but you need to make sure that your worksheets are actually filtered or sized correctly. So make sure you use the preview to actually pull in the information correctly. I'm just going to go with that, and that's going to have to be 2 pages, and this one over here that I can hide, so I'm going to right click hide. I don't need to see my data sheet. This one over here I know is sorted. This pivot table we don't need to see, so I can hide that, and you can see it starts making your workbook look neater. Sales rep, that's a data sheet, I can hide that. And to unhide, for those who don't know, you just right click and unhide, and then they'll give you a list of all the hidden worksheets. So let's just hide that one again. And then I've got my other workbooks, worksheets or layouts that I've created previously. And my trial balance, let's see this one. Let's just go to there. And then it's going to go over a couple of pages, obviously. Now what I can do is I can PDF this by going into File. You can either share it by email, and it automatically PDFs the whole workbook that you have open over here. So any tabs that are actually shown are going to be placed into a PDF document for you. If I open that up, you can see it's 15 pages. And you just need to make sure that your pages are set up correctly. Let's go down to the ones that I've just done. There's my trial balance. And then you've got my dashboard. And then you've got my creditors age. Another way, if you are interested, is if you go to File, you go to Save As, and if you go to more options over here, you change this to PDF. It's here somewhere. There we are. And you can see under PDF, you go to options, and you want to make sure you select entire workbook. That will print any worksheets that are actually shown in this workbook. And that's how you would PDF it and save it. And for more information, you can go to sageintelligence.com. You can use the learning portal, which I just mentioned, which is learning.sageintelligence.com. Or you can go to our Sage Intelligence Academy, where we offer great Excel courses that you can actually purchase online and do in your own time.